My Hero Academia Chapter 405 may be titled Final Boss, but it should be named Bakugoat because he absolutely stole the show. He just took Plus Ultra to new heights and saved All Might from the crusty clutches of All For One. All the major players were in utter disbelief, with their jaws on the floor. Shigaraki was doing quite a bit of trash talking last chapter, but that performance shut him up real quick. In the heat of it all Might briefly lost consciousness and wondered if this wasn't the prophesized moment that Sir Night-Eye foresaw. That's when the vestige of his former sidekick appeared to tell him otherwise. This was that moment. Standing before his idol once more, Night-Eye elaborated that this should have been the end of his dream. The end of the symbol of peace. Now, this isn't the first time that All Might has been visited by the dearly departed soul of his friend. At the end of his battle against All For One, he was firstly visited by his former master Shimura Nana, who encouraged him to keep fighting since things weren't over yet. From there, we saw Sir Night-Eye standing over him as he pointed out that the hero's support items and legs were ruined, that he wouldn't be able to fight anymore. At the time, All Might rationalized these presences to just be hallucinations created by his mind to further encourage himself. And although that's totally plausible and certainly far more rational, I think he may be mistaken here. Based on what we now understand about quirks, it's clear that they are directly tied to the essence of a person's soul. This is why the various users of One For All have remained within the power, and have been able to communicate with Deku to the same extent that a regular person could. Instead of being static ghosts or snapshots of who they once were, they're able to learn, express and experience emotions, share information, and so on. But thanks to All For One, we know that this isn't exclusive to Deku's power, as each and every quirk the Demon Lord has ever stolen has come along with their former wielder's vestige. The souls are held hostage along with the quirk and torment him from within. And from what we've seen of All Might's partial vestige within One For All, a person's death is required for them to be completely formed. All Might is no longer able to empower himself with One For All, but he still remains connected to it. So Shimura Nana's presence when he's this close to joining her makes sense. And based on Shigaraki's first time in the vestige world, that remaining essence of a person isn't limited to only being with one person at a time, since Shimura Nana was there for him too. Quirks are generally hereditary, so even in the case of a mutation, there's a possibility for family members to persist within. And in the case of Sir Night-Eye, his foresight quirk inherently connects itself to others. To activate the power, he first needed to touch and make eye contact with an intended target. Furthermore, he honed his sights and dedicated the last 5 years of his life to avoiding that very future connected to All Might. However, he had to admit that fate had been twisted. Despite trying to blow himself and All For One up, All Might's dream did not end there. And furthermore, his promises remained. His promise to the mother of his surrogate son, his vow to the very same son in question, and his proclamation to himself. With a solemn smile, he playfully wondered if the mentor wasn't supposed to die and pass it on. Night-Eye just told him to save that stuff for the comic books. All Might, in his misunderstanding, questioned what in the world he was making this hallucination of his friend say. With a smile, Sir Night-Eye's parting words were that heroes are human too, that All Might won't die that easily. From there, we rush back to reality because, like I said, this is the Bakugo show now. And as the light show continued through the air, people all over the world stood to their feet in disbelief. Bakugo's got an old man on the verge of a heart attack. A pair of twins we've seen before were stunned to see his explosion quirk on full display. No doubt a top-tier power. His fragmented gear jettisoned elsewhere as both he and All Might failed to stick the landing on a random rooftop. Endeavor's biggest fanboy swiftly recognized the kid as having been the one abducted by the League of Villains in the past. Detective Tsukauchi, clearly a veteran cardholder of the All Might fan club, couldn't contain his relief. Meanwhile, there were people trying to remember Bakugo's name since they recalled him winning, and more importantly, being restrained at the UA Sports Festival. It's kinda crazy that despite being All Might's chosen, and pretty much the main character both in world and literally, Bakugo is still more popular on both fronts than Deku. Pretty much this entire war has been broadcast to some extent, but the reactions to Deku have been far more tame. Bakugo, however, is very hard to ignore. Both heroes bounced on the roof like rocks thrown across a lake. Katsuma and Maharo were overjoyed to see the clutch performance of one of the heroes that once saved them. Katsuma actually has an edge shot pin here, and I honestly thought this might be the most we'd see of the character since he sacrificed himself to save Bakugo. But as we'll soon see, that's not exactly the case. All Might was still grounded, but Bakugo was already back on his feet. Explosions were rippling all over his body at this point as he faced in the direction of a distant All For One. All Might's expression was grim as he asked the young man if he was alright. But with a big smile and his eyes ever trained forward, he told the geezer that that was his line. But to interrupt his coolness, he mimicked his favorite hero a bit too closely as he began spewing blood from his mouth. That's when another voice argued that it was, in fact, his line, much to the literal pain of Bakugo. All Might was confused, to say the least. The center of Bakugo's chest had been sewn up as what looked like a big-headed worm wriggled free from his body. All Might was in just as much shock as I was. It was Edgeshot. The ninja hero explained that because there was so much blood inside of Bakugo, he made the kid throw it all up. Despite clearly being in terrible shape himself, he wondered if the boy felt any better. After that, he broke himself off and fell face, or lace first, on the ground. I am really glad that All Might survived. Edgeshot surviving, okay, we might be pushing it a bit, but this is the last chapter I'm gonna complain about. He continued to say that by using the Hakamata-style secret knotting technique in his own body, he managed to repair Bakugo's broken bones and injured organs. So now, the young hero wouldn't need to worry about collapsing anymore. Now, the name Hakamata seemed pretty random to me, so I did what any reasonable person with a question does and asked Google. Thanks to that, I ended up learning about a Japanese boxer from the 60s that was sentenced to death for mass murder. He's got the world record for being the longest held death row inmate and was released almost 10 years ago. So yeah, I'm not sure if this was what Horikoshi was going for or not, but this isn't the first time a name in this series has brought me to some pretty dark real-world historical event. Anyways, although he patched him up, even just lifting a finger was going to be horribly painful for Bakugo at the moment. It certainly wasn't the ideal body to be jumping around in. Bakugo clutched onto his chest for a moment. Then, with a smile, he accepted the risks and thanked his senior hero for saving his life and letting him live. However, an exhausted Edgeshot felt the need to correct him there. All he really did was bind things together. He kept trying to make the boy's heart and lungs resume function, but despite his best efforts, Bakugo would not wake up. The procedure itself ate away at the shinobi's own life. He was at his absolute limit. Things were looking bad, and it was either his life or Bakugo's. One of them was bound to die. But just then, something unexpected ran through Bakugo's bloodstream. It was one of the tiny spears of sweat that Bakugo created just before effectively dying. It exploded and suddenly revitalized him. Again, all Edgeshot did was bind things together. But what really brought Bakugo back was the very quirk he had strengthened over many years. All Might was in awe as the young man just stood there for a moment. Just then, the loudmouth wanted to know who the heck that shining kid in the sky was. He admitted that his gut made him think that it was All For One, which is a very impressive gut feeling, one that I'm sure is related to his connection to One For All, and by extension, the Demon Lord. All Might was quick to confirm the boy's suspicions, but he still couldn't move due to the effects of the blood curdle quirk All For One stole from the late hero killer Stain. But he still told Bakugo to give him his arm. Bakugo turned, unsure of what was to come. All Might let him know that although the thing is busted now, it could still serve as a splint. He grabbed hold of the kid and called him by his hero name while the transfer was made. Great Explosion Murder God, Dynamite. Even after All Might let go, Bakugo kept his hand extended. All Might was officially at his limit and apologized for this being the only thing he could give him at the moment. But Bakugo smiled. He smiled just as brightly and as genuinely as he had when he had gotten the All Might trading card as a kid. Okay, you guys got me. Squidward to the Krabby Patties moment. I am officially a full-fledged Bakugo stan from this day forward. When it comes to this sort of symbolism, Horikoshi is really a different kind of talent. Oh my goodness, the levels of fulfillment are unreal. The chapter could end right here and it would easily be a 10 out of 10 to me. But lucky for us, it's not over yet. All For One was taking our Megamind joke even further and was popping multiple blood vessels as he observed them. At this point, that's what anyone hating on Bakugo looks like right now. The Demon Lord had to resist the urge to ruin the moment since he was almost totally out of time at this point. He needed to get his hands on One For All. No, he needed to get his brother. To do that, he needed to overcome Shigaraki's extreme sense of self. Transferring the copy of the All For One quirk to him should be enough to get the job done. That way, the him inside of Shigaraki would be able to wrestle back control. But to say that All For One was pissed would be an understatement. He considered all the worthless insects that had opposed him, and it made his blood boil. As he thought of each and every one of them and their contributions, he couldn't help but ask himself, why was everything going so horribly wrong? Somehow Mineta managed to sneak his way in here, which is honestly hilarious to me. Yeah, All For One is cooked. If he's at the point of doubting his decades-long plan, it's only a matter of time before Shigaraki eats him and shows us what the true singularity looks like. Because while he was sweating the details, Bakugo used his to close the distance in an instant and let him know who the real final boss was. The wind was not blowing in his favor as Bakugo dropped his balls of sweat right on the villain's ugly face. And just like Shigaraki before him, only one thing came to mind. Bakugo's ancestor, the second user of One For All. Boom! With a cataclysmic explosion, Bakugo did what All Might failed to do and obliterated the opposition. This was an attack brought together by everyone's efforts. With an absolutely wild look on his face, Bakugo let it be known that he's the guy who steps in when the nerd can't handle things all on his own. Somebody lock the kitchen doors quick because Horikoshi is in here cooking. If he keeps making me get loud like this week after week, I might just manifest a quirk of my own. Bakugo Nation, rise up, and please welcome your newest member. As always, I'm Slice of Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.